Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, and welcome to Blog Talk Radio show of Seasons of the Witch with Raven and Taylor-Grimassi. We are so happy tonight to be relaunching our show, which was, believe it or not, back in 2013. We started it in March of 2013, and we ran it for a year, and then, of course, we've been on a hiatus since then.
Well, the network went under is what happened. And then we stopped doing the show. We had opportunities to come back and do it again, but we were just really busy with this, that, and the other thing. So now we have this opportunity to return to the Seasons of the Witch.
Yeah, so very, very happy about that. Well, and plus we've also had many people, supporters and friends, encourage us to bring the show back because they enjoyed it so much. And that was very encouraging and inspirational for both Raven and I.
Indeed. And this show will be similar in some ways to what we used to do. We will have guests on occasion and, that type of thing. But generally, we just really want to talk about various topics that relate to witchcraft, to the community, to probably even news items from time to time. We don't really want to do a political commentary or be a political commentary show. We're more about the magic and the religion and spirituality. But sometimes things happen, and I'm sure we will have a political comment here and there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we've had an incredible couple of 2 years too that have in many ways been challenging, but also have brought a lot of growth and insight, and have really created a new vision for Raven and I, moving ahead with our life and our careers, and being part of a broader community that's really invested in bringing spirituality, magic, veneration of ancestors, all of the things that we really feel are important for growth, and I don't necessarily like this word, but I'm going to say enlightenment, because that's really an important aspect of who we are and what we have to offer, Raven and I together, in our quest moving forward. I think a lot of people forget, and Raven probably doesn't want me to say this, but Raven and I are both in our mid-60s now, and so looking forward, we really want to utilize the time that we have to really have a voice in what we feel is an important aspect of being consciously aware and living in these days that can be very trying and challenging for everybody.
And also we're I think some people may look at the work that we do, and my writings in particular, which is always sort of stress an old world view or, an argument for foundations or origins, whether people agree with that or not. What I'm saying about them isn't really the point. The point is more about the spirit. I really stress a spiritual lineage, that none of this is really new. We have new ways of doing old things. But that really this is all traceable back to origins. It may not have been everything together at the same time as it is today, with the sabbats and different things. But we're kind of old stick-in-the-mud witches. But we, in our tradition, we refer to it as ever ancient, ever new, because we also value the newness. I often describe this thing, the craft or paganism or witchcraft, Wicca, whatever it might be, metaphorically as a giant tree. And you have the trunk visible, you have the branches and leaves and the flowers and fruit, seeds, all visible. And these are things that move into the future, because they provide essence now, but also renewal through the seed and whatnot. But at the base of it all is the roots. And these roots go down very, very deep. They were originally the first part of that tree. You don't see them now when you look at a tree, typically. But they're there, and they're very deep. And actually, from everything I've read, the roots of a tree, if you look at the height of the tree, the roots are 3 times as long underneath it. So what we're trying to bring is to the newness, the rootedness as well. It's important. And I think that maybe a lot of people don't really understand that it is important because they're fine with the new branches and leaves and fruit and flowers. But without the roots, it eventually, the tree dies and withers away. So I think it is important. So part of what we want to do in our work, and I think also through this radio show, is to show why that's important, because some people may not realize that it is and why it would be and why bother with it. Why not just enjoy sort of the eclectic approach and the new way visions and that type of thing, and those are all well and good. But there is a nourishment that comes to all of that, which I think is really important. So while some people may look at, witches of our generation, as maybe, outdated or the old guard or whatever, people might want to think, because of the rootedness of what we have experienced over many, many decades, because of that, there is something to offer. There is something worth looking at and attaching to, not abandoning what everyone already has connected with and enjoys, but adding that other dimension to see that that's equally as important.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about what you're just saying too, and I was thinking in the terms of the value, as you said, of what we represent and what we bring to the table as old world, which is, so to speak, the rootedness of that. And I know that in this day and age, a lot of what you're going to hear are the things that we've spoken about before, because that really stays true to who we are and what we represent, and that is the idea that structure does have value in that it gives you a point of reference in which to go out into the world, where you are able to extend yourself into many other things, but that you still have a core, I don't even know if it's a value, but a core essence of knowledge that you can view things from, that enchanted world view, where you can discern what is going to work for you and what isn't, and as you formulate that. But structure, I think, Raven, you've always described it as building a house.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can, by analogy, you can look at the idea that if you hire me as a contractor to build your home, I'm going to build it with traditional building techniques, time proven, so that the house doesn't fall apart, that it's properly insulated, and then all the people will come together under a direction. So I have to have the electricians show up, the plumbers, the carpenters, and I've got to oversee that. So that would be traditionally building you a house. But it doesn't shackle you, because I don't tell you how to live in that house. I don't tell you what rooms have to be, equipped with this or that, or furnished with this or that. That's up to you, what color you want, all those things. I just build the structure under time-proven, time-honored ways, so that the house is structured and viable. You can rely upon the walls holding, that type of thing. So that's kind of the way, that we look at that. But there is, much to be said for the intuitive practice, for the intuitive view. And but again, there are traditional things that maybe people haven't really thought about the importance of. For example, I'll have people tell me, well, Raven, I don't need to use ritual tools anymore. I've been doing this a long time, and I don't need a wand and a blade and a chalice and a pentacle or any other tool. I could just cast the circle, by envisioning it because I've done it many, many times. And I said, yeah, I get that. I don't really need tools anymore either. I've been doing this for as long as I can remember. But by analogy, I can eat a plate of spaghetti without a fork or a spoon. I can shove my face into the noodles and just slurp them up. But the utensils, the tools, the spoon, the fork, makes it a different experience for me. Either way, I can eat the spaghetti and be satisfied with the meal, but the experience is different based upon, do I traditionally, use my tools, the fork and spoon, and the plate to have the spaghetti dinner, or do I just decide to go about it as I please in the moment? Both will get you fed, but what is the experience in the end? What did it feel like? What drew this all together? And that's the kind of thing I like to bring into the picture. These time-honored ways. I first entered the Wicca community, craft community, back in the summer of 1969. That was my first public entrance. And so much is different now. And a lot of it's good. A lot of it I sort of scratch my head and go, about. But back in the 60s, the craft was quite different. And today, on those rare occasions where I still go into chat rooms, I will see people posting, what is Wicca? I tend not to reply anymore because I'm replying from my 40, 50 years of experience in Wicca, which many people look at today and they don't really understand what I'm talking about. And they go, where'd you get that from? And I'm like, 40-something years of practice, But they're going, well, we never heard of that before. And I think, well, that's interesting, because people aren't writing about it anymore. What I saw in my years of experience is in the 80s, it all changed. And you had writers like Scott Cunningham coming along with the do whatever feels right approach, and a lot of the traditional things were jettisoned. People thought they were encumbering, they were in the way, they were outdated, they were obstructions, and that all you needed to do was just feel it and make it happen. And so what happened as a result of that is a lot of the foundational teachings, the time-honored things, the time-proven things of the earlier periods tended not to be repeated in books and magazines anymore. And so a generation or two later, when I would bring up these things, they'd never heard of them, and I suppose some of them thought I was making it up because they'd never heard of it before. But now you have to dig back to much, much older books to find a lot of this stuff. So we like bringing that back, not to replace what anyone's doing today, but to give them another enhancement, another thing to look at. Well,
and also, the criticism has been that we think it's better, or we think it's greater than, and our way is the best, and we're elitist or even cultish, but that's really not an accurate description of what we do.
No. Well, even in our own tradition of Ashbrook and Willow, which we'll probably touch on here and in another show, we are traditional in the structure of that witchcraft tradition. However, we make it clear to our initiates that they're free to go take classes from other teachers, other systems. They can go to seminars, they can go to festivals,
retreats,
whatever they want,
workshops.
because we're not about cutting people off from knowledge, and we're not trying to shackle anybody, with the old ways. But we do ask the initiates, because they have initiated, which to us means a commitment. We ask them to make Ashbrook and Willow their primary practice. So, they can go to another workshop, they can go to some event and participate in a ritual from another tradition if they like.
And of course, they can read other books.
Yeah, read other books.
Honestly.
Now people, some people keep repeating that. We don't allow that we're cultish, and you can only buy my books, and you can only, which is utter nonsense, but it serves, I suppose, their agenda to tell those misrepresentations. But what we're about is making sure that the foundational things don't disappear over time, that they're always available. So really that's what we're talking about, the availability, not the displacement of anything anyone wants to do, but to have these foundational things, just like building the house. I mean, wouldn't it be more pleasant for you to be able to close the door in your newly built house and not have the walls fall apart? Because the contractor just figured out, well, I'm just going to do whatever feels right here to me and build this house without any, attachment to sound building principles. You want something to be able to function for you. And things that are uniquely available to the individual, like somebody who's just completely eclectic and that system works well for them, and that's great. But are they leaving anything behind for others when they're gone? What have they contributed to the whole? And this really is more about the wholeness than it is about any one of us. And that's the old craft view, that it isn't about us as individuals. It's about what we bring to the table for the community, how we support one another, how we strengthen one another, how we stand together. And it's human nature, if you don't have let's call it a tribe, or you don't have a clan of some sort, it's very easy for other people, other forces to come in and move you out and make you disappear. And then theirs is the only story told. And I think there's a loss in that idea. I think that we all need to share our teachings, whether we're sharing something traditional, whether we're sharing something eclectic or something old or something new. The idea is sharing it so that we get a bigger perspective. We don't want our witchcraft to be shackling or have blinders on for anybody. We want them to be able to expand and grow. And I always use this example. I used to teach a magic class, a Wicca 101 type thing, and I would bring out this large crystal that I had. It was pretty huge, and it was shaped in different ways. Like one side, might be really fine terminals, and the other side was kind of crusty, and some were cracked and some were smooth, some were clear, some had infractions in them. And I would set it in the circle. People would be sitting around it in a circle, and I would go around and ask everybody to describe what the crystal looked like. Well, you get all unique descriptions because from their perspective, they were seeing the crystal in a different way. So at the end, I would say, okay, so everyone's seen this crystal, and everyone's seeing it different, but what they saw is true, but it's only true from their perspective. You could sit there and argue all night long that no, it's cracked because you're seeing the cracked side, and no, you can't be because here it is, it's all smooth, without ever being able to allow that person, their perspective added to yours, to change your view, to be able to say, well, I see it as a really beautiful terminal, but you're saying it's cloudy and cracked, so because you're seeing that and we're sitting in front of this full crystal, then I need to understand that there's that aspect of it. So at the end, by sharing all of our views of what that crystal looked like, we then together could understand the complete view of the crystal. But without sharing it in all of our perspectives, everybody would be left with simply their view of the crystal. And they would think that to be the ultimate truth of the crystal when it's not. So this is the value of us sharing. This is the value of rootedness, where these ideas last. And we become much, much stronger together than we can be separately. And our teachings are more sound and last the test of time. And I just think that that's important.
That is important. I also think that, since we are, what we term as advancing towards renewal, that, looking back to being, both Raven and I grew up in the 60s, and, I remember my mother was very liberal, but I remember adults and what they called the establishment criticizing the innovations and the things that were going on in the 60s that were anti-establishment, and thinking that, that they were so different that they were threatening to them because it was really pushing the envelope against what had been tried and true then. However, even then, all of those things moved us forward to where we are, where we have become the kind of thinkers that we are now. And looking back at these new generations, or looking at the new generations, not looking back at them, but looking at them, I see that that's exactly what's occurring with them too. In essence, I've become my mother.
Yeah.
I'm not the establishment, but it's still fascinating to watch what people are doing, and that brings me to the idea of the seeker. What is the seeker looking for? And I'm basically addressing the younger people. What are they seeking for in this day and age of minimalization in this electronic age and social media, and the disconnect of personal involvement, where it has become just social media and much more less personal, I would say. What are they seeking? What is that they're looking for? And there are so many choices now because of the internet and social media and the things that they can connect to, that sometimes I feel like that's got to just be so overwhelming and at times even desensitizing, because they just don't, they're just so overwhelmed, they're not really sure what they should grab onto anymore.
Well, yeah, it's constant stimulation, which, there's two sides of the coin to that whole thing. But, I see people, everywhere I go, everyone's on a cell phone constantly. I've seen people sitting together in a restaurant having dinner and everyone's on their cell phone and they're not talking to each other, So the experience is odd, and it's just a stimulus. And I'm not sure how I would, had I grown up that way, I'm not sure what my worldview would have been, back when I was growing up. We didn't have cell phones, so.
Well, they seem to be sharing what's going on in everybody else's lives,
right,
rather than being involved in their own lives and sharing that relationship between each other.
Or they just see that as their
as the way it is.
As the way it is.
Yeah.
But back in the old days, we sat and had conversations face to face. There weren't cell phones, and if you wanted to talk to somebody, you had to go visit them or meet them somewhere, and so your conversations were face to face, and that changed the dynamics. It's easy on the computer to say a lot of things, that wouldn't be so easy to say face to face, and so there was a different code, I guess, of behavior. But anything goes now. I see it all the time on Facebook. People can get really nasty and snarky. I think in a way they wouldn't if it was just you and them in a room together. I don't think that would probably fly. But we see that so often, and then for us as kind of old timers, it puzzles us that mean-spiritedness and rudeness and bravado and all that seems to just be the way it is. And that's not to say everybody does that, but an uncomfortably large proportion of people do that, But then there are what I call the nobles, There are the people that come in and object to that and just, or delete it, if it's their wall or whatever it might be, just trying to retain some sense of being cordial and respectful for each other. I think disagreements are fine as long as they're respectable differences. I don't have an issue with that. When I read a negative book review, one of my books, if the person's put a sound argument and isn't just being pissy, because they don't like something I said, or they met me at a festival and I wasn't friendly enough, or whatever the case might be, that a respectful difference. And I've read some book reviews where I said, oh, yeah, I get why you didn't like that book, and I get why it didn't speak to you. And so that's cool, but when it's just, an attack on you as an individual or your character, that's really got nothing to do with your book. So part of the reason we named the show Seasons of the Witch is because we want to be about the changes, seasons coming and going. So that's a marker for us. We want to be relevant to the new generation, but we also want to bring our strengths to add to theirs. And so Seasons of the Witch is our way of going through the seasons. Sometimes we'll talk about old stuff, sometimes we'll talk about new things, and talk about, have guests on that are young, new authors that have fresh ideas to add. We've already have 3 musicians who are allowing us to use their music on our show. And again, that's the community I'm seeing, the idea of people coming together to share, to make it a better experience. So we have these great musicians that are letting us use their music. We're hoping people will come on to the chat room, exchange ideas with us. Sometime in the future we may even have people call in. We'll definitely have guests, and we'll really be able to move through the Seasons of the Witch. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So don't think we're just, going to be here pounding the old ways are the best ways. And that you get to hear that over and over and over.
No, of course not.
That would bore even me.
No, we will. This show really was just the relaunch to reacquaint you with us and our enchanted worldview, and just kind of just talk a little bit about what's happened and what's happening, and
we'll be posting what each show is about. Right now we're thinking of doing it every other week.
Right, it will be, actually we do have a schedule, we'll be posting it. It will be every other Wednesday for now. Same time though, same station. And if we get a good response, or, people want to hear us more often and time allots, then we will by all means do it weekly as we did before. Because
right.
That was, we really did have a great time doing the show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I think that, you can look and see what show's coming up. If the topic interests you, pop in.
Well, we'll certainly ask our audience what they'd like to hear from us, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and even some of the guests that you might like to hear from as well. Because, again, as Raven says, this show is, it's about us bringing to you the things that you would like to know more about, and those that you would like to hear from as well. I mean, we really value that. Without having an audience, without Raven having his readership, without our students that take our courses, without our initiates, these are the people and the groups and the communities, the stores that host us, the festivals that invite us. It is because of all of these people that we are able to continue to do and be who we are and live the life that we do, and that's so important to us.
Yeah, and it's exciting that continues on. I mean, this year has been a really good year with people reaching out to us and inviting us, bookstores wanting to carry our books, and different things that is adding to the momentum of what we're trying to bring through. So it's nice to feel viable in that way, but also trying to stay tuned into the needs of the new generation, because we want to be viable for those folks as well. In our own story, I mean, I'm, like I said, I entered the craft in 1969, and I had been involved in a lineage tradition before that. So the idea of bringing all of this out, who am I? Well, I'm sort of old world in my views of witchcraft. My mother was born and raised in Italy, so I was raised in an old world vision about life and honor and respect and those types of things that people find puzzling sometimes with me, because I still have my upbringing, and so I tried to bring that idea of family and personal honor and those things. Some people will misunderstand. You do something that they think is wrong, and so then they judge you as having been unfaithful to your honor, rather than understanding that was part of your honor as you saw it. So these are the kinds of things I want to also bring in, is understanding where someone's coming from, that they're still able to be ethical and honorable within their worldview, but still able to take a stand, to protect themselves, to move forward, and to understand what their spirituality is to them. You can't dictate someone's spirituality to someone else. It's yours. You own it. You live it. As long as you're faithful to true to yourself, then it stands. It doesn't matter what someone else says about it. So these are the old world messages that you'll hear from time to time. And then the new ones are just going to be, tell us about life today. Tell us about the craft as you see it. People call in or in the chat room, share visions that we can become enriched and enlightened, by the new generation's point of view, because that's equally as important for us.
I always think it's always so generous of Raven to say that people are buying our books. Because I haven't written a book myself, but I just think it's
co-authored the books for 2
yeah,
decks,
but those are for the decks that we had, but those are out of print. But still, I just think it's always so generous of them to say that. And with that note, I would like to now play a song by the lovely Kellyanna, and have you give a listen to this, because I believe that regardless of all the rest, we all walk with the goddess. So let's have a listen to Kellyanna.
And we'll be back after the song.
Right.
I walk with the goddess. The goddess, she walks with me. I walk with the goddess. The goddess, she walks with me. She is the clouds up in the clear blue sky. She is the ground beneath my feet. She is the oceans and the falling rain. She is the spark that lights my way. I walk with the goddess. The goddess, she walks with me. I walk with the goddess. The goddess, she walks with me. I walk with the goddess. The goddess, she walks with me. I walk with the goddess. The goddess, she walks with me. She is the clouds up in the clear blue sky. She is the ground beneath my feet. She is the oceans and the falling rain. She is the spark that lights my way. I walk with the goddess. The goddess, she
Welcome back to Seasons of the Witch with Raven and Stephanie Grimassi. Thank you for joining us again this evening. I just wanted to say that tonight's show is going to be shorter than the shows to come. We are scheduled to do a 2-hour show every other Wednesday night, but tonight being the introductory, we thought that we would just cut that, it won't be 2 hours. We're not really sure how long it'll be because I guess
We're just winging it. So we came in just thinking, well, let's just, get the show introduced, and so we didn't really have a pre-planned, but normally we do. We have a pre-planned topic, and we carry it for 2 hours, but tonight ain't going to be that way.
So Raven and I thought that, firstly, do you want to talk about the chat room?
Why don't you read that? We had a message in the chat room, which I think is pretty cool.
Right. It reads, as far as I believe, the old ways seemed more spiritually based. They were more respectful of the ancestors and the spirit realm. I've seen, at least here on the West Coast, a change over the years to a more party-oriented community, a Rocky Horror mentality instead of a spiritual one. It's sad, but that's just the opinion. But again, that is an opinion that's valid because if you're not finding community that really speaks to your needs, then where do you go for that? How do you develop that?
Yeah, and I have, had many communications from people that are looking for something spiritual, and they're moving from tradition to tradition, coven to coven, whatever it might be, because they're not feeling satisfied. And to me, that's where the roots come in. That's the foundational stuff that gives you that focus and that balance. It becomes an inner being, just the way that you are, and it's based upon a person's metal. It's based upon the things that have proven themselves to you in a spiritual way, that carries you through adversity. The sort of flying by the seat of your pants doesn't really get you through adversity typically, because adversity can become overwhelming. I'll share something from my own experience last year. I was critically ill, and I was actually dying in a hospital last April. And what sustained me and really got me through that was my own sense of spirituality, the things that I had connected with, the things that were rooted in my own being, my relationship with entities and with the deities that I venerate. These are the things that came to me in that moment, that gave me strength. It wasn't, the fun times that I've had, accumulatively in my life that came to me and sustained me in that moment. It wasn't, the fun rituals that I've done or the cool things that happened at festivals. It was in the end, in the final analysis, I had to face death with what was core to my being, and I learned a lot in that moment, and certainly about spirituality, because in that moment when you realize that death is there and that you can die and probably will, the things that are important to you become crystal clear. And you realize that what you're taking with you into the next world is the resonance of your being. It's what came to be the strength that you had. We're going to do some more on this later, but I just think that this is an important thing because of the person that mentioned in the chat room about spirituality, that in that moment, on the edge of life and death, that's really what's important. And it's not important what you did with a spell or what you don't do with spells. None of that is important when you're on that edge. What actually is important is, what is the resonance of your being? How have you treated other people? How have you treated yourself? What is your connection with the divine? Those are the things that you realize are really key and important when you stand on that edge. So I think that the person in the chat room is spot on about spirituality is extremely important.
Right, and also, of course, the ancestors. We, in our tradition of Ash, Birch, and Willow, and in our previous practice in Strageria, that ancestors are a large part of our enchanted worldview. We go to the ancestors, we ask for guidance, we ask for blessings. This is a very deep veneration to them and to that whole ley line of looking at the living river of blood. And that, again, that'll be another subject of discussion. I wanted to say again, but what Raven was just saying about what really counts is, again, what is the seeker looking for? What is the individual? Why have they come to this spirituality or to witchcraft? Have they come for the arts of witchcraft? Have they come for the spiritual practice of witchcraft? Are they looking at it as a religion? Do they just want to do, magic? Do they just want to go to rituals, in communities? I mean, what is the impetus of why they're even drawn to it to begin with? Mm-hmm. And I do believe, Raven, as you were saying, when you started in the 60s, that this was not as large of a paradigm for as many people as it has become.
Right. Because
there's a theory that things start as a first wave, as a thought or an invention, and then they move to second wave, where more people come in and start tweaking it a little bit, and then it moves to third wave, where people are really practicing and kind of meshing it all together. But when it hits fourth wave, it has become a mass, a thing for the masses, and then unfortunately, that is when the adulteration of it comes, where the all of these other things come into play that start really not necessarily negative in that it affects it negatively, but the experimentation starts, and sometimes it really does start to fall off, and then there's splinter groups that start because of that, and so now you've got this. The word I want to use is mishmash. It's not a nice word, but you do. You have this. It's kind of the same thing that happened with Christianity. You have all these splinter groups. You have all this secular,
right.
traditions, and so
each one representing itself
and
in
each
the
one,
correct way.
I was just going to say that exactly.
Or a better way, or whatever. You were talking about what are people seeking, and I think that changes from decade to decade.
Absolutely,
people don't realize
absolutely.
that. When I was in my 20s, I mean,
Yes.
my world was that of a 20-year-old.
Yes.
I never really knew what I would be like here in my 60s.
No,
but
you didn't.
looking back now, I can clearly see the changes that take place intellectually, emotionally, physically. And each decade that you experience will change that. And as an author, some people try to keep me, tied to a book that I wrote, 30 years ago or whatever it might have been, and as though that is still my view. And my views have changed over time because I'm a human being and I'm
That's what you call me.
yeah, and so, I always say, I hope if you're 60 years old, I hope that you still don't believe everything you did when you were 20. I certainly don't. Some things, yes, absolutely. But you should change. I mean, that's all why we're here. We're here to evolve and to grow, And I always laugh and chuckle because, my first book was on Italian witchcraft, and that was 1995. And people still sort of hold me to this, being the Italian guy, but I have about 21 books in print, and only 3 of them have anything to do with Italian witchcraft. So, I'm really not the Italian guy. I just happened to write a book on Italian witchcraft, which I hope would be a bridge between the Wiccan community and the Strega community. It unfortunately didn't work out that way. But today, we practice a non-cultural tradition. I've been in Celtic traditions, Italic traditions, Germanic, British, different traditions over the decades, I guess as a seeker. But what happened to me, there was a huge shift And I let all that fall away, all the cultural markers of my witchcraft and me as a witch. And I fell away. I write in the introduction to, I think it's Old Ways of Witchcraft or the Grimoire of the Twin-Blooded Witch, which are about the tradition we're practicing now, that I fell into the boiling cauldron of witchcraft. And when I came up out of the bubbling brew, I had been stripped of all my cultural connections. And I didn't reemerge as an Italian witch or a Celtic witch or a Germanic witch. I arose as a witch. And there was a huge liberation in that, not being tied to the constraints of any one particular cultural view. Because as beautiful as all those traditions are, and I've been in some of them, they are a limited view. They're the cultural perspective of what's happening on the earth, or of what is a deity or whatever. And they're constrained within cultural norms and views and stories and whatnot. But
not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But it is, you know, if you grew up in an Italian neighborhood your whole life, your worldview would be of that
right.
Italian neighborhood. You wouldn't really understand, you know, other cultures that you might become immersed in. You would fall back. Your default setting would be, you know, your Italian neighborhood and the way that you saw life. But once you travel the world, you take the guy out of, you know, the Bronx or whatever, and you take him around the world, let him see other cultures, experience other foods, and, you know, other ways and views that people have. You know, hopefully that makes you go, oh, you know, and grow a little bit. And I like to think that over several decades that that personally I have grown. I know my work has certainly changed. People who are reading it now, who have read it before, you know, have remarked in very positive ways, you know, where my material has gone, because I've grown as an author, as a practitioner. Some people have stopped reading my books, you know, with just maybe even the Italian, because they didn't like it or whatever the case may be. So they don't really know what I'm writing about today. But when my name comes up, they default back to something I wrote in 1995, you know, complaining about where I'm at as a witch, not realizing that I've moved on through many decades of growth, but they haven't. They still want to hold me to something I said in 1995 as though that's going to be my ultimate truth forever, which it's not. So, you know, I guess the point of this ramble is that, you know, I'm not just the Italian guy, you know, that my witchcraft now has become much more, I don't want to say universal, but it's certainly outside of any constraints of a cultural norm. So right now we have a tradition that Stephanie and I practice called Ash, Birch, and Willow, and it's a construction taking the commonality of traditions that are rooted in various cultures. What do they all hold in common? You know, what was their ritual year? What was their magic? What did they believe in at the core, without adding on all the cultural myths and legends and stuff? What was agreeable between all of them, do you think? You know, and so we looked at that very closely, thinking those are the oldest roots. You know, the commonalities that they shared are the oldest roots, and then the cultural view of that is the new branches and flowers and fruit and seed that came from that. So we have found a lot of liberations. Ash, Birch, and Willow accepts everyone's view into it. You know, if you're an Italian witchcraft, then when people came in, they had to adhere, you know, to that Italian format or Celtic format or whatever it might have been. Some people felt excluded, because I had people back in the day tell me, well, I'm not Italian, I can't practice Italian witchcraft, which wasn't true, but they excluded themselves because they didn't relate to the culture. So people may exclude themselves from a Celtic because they're Germanic or Greek or something, you know. So when you have that position, as beautiful as it is, it almost does exclude others. And that's their choice, obviously. You're not trying to do that yourself. But with Ash, Birch, and Willow, we don't have people enter with that knee-jerk reaction that, oh, you know, I can't really practice this tradition because I'm not from that culture. There is no culture in Ash, Birch, and Willow. It's just the commonality of witchcraft and the spirituality that is the commonality of the older traditions. So we like to look at it as it's a pre-Christian spirituality. And we look at a lineage which is a spiritual lineage. We're not making claims that people have been practicing ash, birch, and willow since the first, caveman woke up. We're saying that we have a spiritual lineage which is traceable back to the beliefs and practices of European people who saw the world in different ways. But we're looking at the primal ways that they saw the world, because those are the things that empowered them. And those primal experiences and beliefs were the things that went on to form the traditions, to form the myths and legends. So the myths and legends are expressions of the commonality. And that's why in Ash, Birch, and Willow we embrace that commonality, because we have roots to all that the ancestors believed and practiced. And we're not cutting it off by a cultural wall being built around it. So we're very excited about Ash, Birch, and Willow. It's a growing tradition. We have initiates, not only here in the United States, but outside other countries. And it is growing, and people are finding old world roots but what they're enjoying, I think, most about Ash, Birch, and Willow is that it's ever ancient, ever new. And people that open themselves up to the experience of Ash, Birch, and Willow, they enter into an ancestral agreement, I guess I would call it. They enter into the living river of blood that flows from generation to generation. People will and have, left the tradition for various reasons, and it's interesting. We are an intermystery tradition, and there are reasons that people will move away or out of those traditions. Sometimes they've just learned, basically, in their evolution, all they're going to get out of that particular experience, so they don't continue on because they sort of filled up on what they could relate to. Other people, misunderstand and don't persevere, so they walk away. In an intermystery tradition, you walk the labyrinth. When you commit, you walk the complete labyrinth. That's the only way you can experience and know the labyrinth. If you only take 5 steps in and back out and leave, anything you say about your experience in the labyrinth doesn't hold water, because you haven't experienced the labyrinth. And so you have all these ideas which have nothing to do with the totality. So initiation, from our perspective, is commitment, and it's commitment to walk that labyrinth and learn the lessons and the empowerment of having traversed and successfully mapped out that labyrinth and understood each corridor, each pathway, each doorway, whatever it might have been. And that's, I think, the richness that some of these rooted traditions can offer. Once you come out the other end of that, you're changed and transformed in very positive ways. If you don't follow it through, the transformation doesn't take place. And so, I don't want to say that you wasted your time, but you only got a small perspective. What that was, your view of the crystal was quite limited, and yet you think it was the crystal, but it was only your glimpse of the crystal.
And now I think that we are going to play another song, and this song will be by the lovely Jenna Green. And it's kind of appropriate for right now. It's The Crossroads.
Oh.
Through the doorway of elder sages, cloaked in the veil, I journey circling the sacred wheel forever turning. But now I have a choice to make. At the crossroads, which path do I take? When hope is lost and I take the path less taken. False voices are calling me to what seems far beyond my reach. Sacred sparkles stir in me. Awakened, I must go on. Moon mist of endless ages, gazing back upon life's pages, the sands of time slip through my fingers. My vision clears, but doubt still lingers, invoking gods of mythic might to let the wings of hope take flight. I take a step, my path is laid. Will they bless the choice I've made? Your voices summon me to share the songs I weave. Inspiration stirs in me. Awakened, I must go on. Moon mist of endless ages, countless masks upon life's stages, the lies I've lived, the roles I've played. My dreams denied, myself betrayed. Time to change my destiny and finally let my soul break free. I lay a new path, I make a new choice to follow muse's beckoning voice. New voices guiding me. All doubt and fear are gone. Sacred sparkles flow through me. Awakened, I will go on. Moon mist of endless ages. Moon mist of endless ages.
Well, welcome back to the show, Seasons of the Witch with Raven and Stephanie Grimassi. We have a couple other questions from the chat room that we'd like to read, and then we can talk a little bit about it because they're excellent questions. So the question is, how would you explain to someone how Old Ways witches do not exactly embrace the harm none philosophy? Some folks get the wrong idea and assume Old Ways witches advocate harm willy-nilly, like, you know, you can do whatever you want type of thing. So let's give a little talk about that, and the idea of the harm none.
Well, you know, again, I think this comes from foundational understandings and rootedness in the way that what I would call old world witchcraft and its practitioners would view things. It's very much like nature itself, or even any creature within nature. You know, an animal in nature prefers to be left alone, left, unmolested. You know, just let it be. And if you do, it'll just do its thing and be around you, or leave, or whatever the case may be. But if you corner it, you know, then you've got a situation. You know, and that's natural. So. The idea of harm none, you know, the Wiccan idea of harm none, I mean, people even disagree as to what that means. Some people believe it's a suggestion, you know, try not to harm somebody. Some people think it's a commandment, you know, don't do anything that harms anyone. Well, you know, that doesn't really work consistently within the model of nature itself, because things do harm other things all the time. And, you know, you harm something that you eat, and even if it's a plant, you know, the plant died in order for you to do that. life is life no matter what the container. Within our own bodies are killing bacteria and viruses off all the time for the greater good of the body. So the old world witch is kind of in that view, not wanting, it's not about harming anybody, and it's not about manipulating anybody. It's just about, being in your witchcraft and moving on with you as that being. But if someone comes along and causes you to be in a corner, that's a whole different situation. From my perspective as an old world witch, I don't believe anyone has the right to make me have to spend days, reinforcing my wards, or, casting spells, or, getting in touch with my allies, because of their idiotic moment in which they wanted to attack me for whatever their reasons might have been. So from my perspective, just like in my martial arts training, I was taught to quickly put an end to any conflict. And so to me, the harm none thing is, if someone has launched an attack upon me, I will defend myself. I'm not out for total destruction. I'm just out to quickly end it so that I can get back to my life and my being. One thing that I was taught, and it was the only law in a particular tradition that I was involved in, but I think it's a wise thing, and this is the law. And it's not this is not the Wiccanry, this is a different law.
According to us.
Well, it's what I was taught, I'm just sharing.
Right, I know, I just want to
that.
caveat that.
The law was, we never harm the innocent. And then we define what innocent is. Innocent is someone who has not provoked you. Provoke us, and you have lost the protection of being innocent because you no longer are. So at that point, it allows the witch to quickly dispatch whatever it is you've thrown against them. Now, sometimes things will be put on you, or you will put on someone else, because, there was a legitimate need, and sometimes you're the receiving end of that, whether it's a binding or, whatever it might be. And bindings typically are just meant to stop someone else's behavior that is harmful or disruptive to you, or in some way interfering with you just getting on with things. So that may be put on you. Somebody may bind me, or I may bind somebody else. But in their worldview, it was, it was justified. Whether it was or isn't, or was not, is a whole side issue. But when it comes down to that act, the ethics of an old world witch would be, how important is it to do that? Is this something I really need to do, or can I ignore it and move on? Am I cornered? Cornered typically means that the person won't stop. You just can't get away from it. So there's no escape. So now you have to defend yourself. So that would be the old worldview. And it's not, oh, good, I get a chance to harm somebody. Of course not. It's, oh, crap, I've got to defend myself. Old world witches aren't out about harm. And it's not that power game. We did see a bit of that in the 60s, where everybody wanted to prove they were more powerful than everyone else. And so these, as the chat room thing said, these willy-nilly spells that were thrown out and cursing people and carrying on was largely bravado. People that are kind of in that headspace really don't have the power to do it, because the more you have to talk about how powerful you are, the less powerful you probably are. It's the same thing in martial arts. You don't let your opponent even know that you know karate until it's too late. So you don't say, well, I must warn you before you approach me that I know karate. You don't say that. You let them find out in their idiotic moment of laying hands on you that you're well able to defend yourself. So that would be the old world witch. Now, there was another question.
Right. It was, what are the ethics of old ways witch? Now, that could be a whole show in itself.
Yeah, and again, I've sort of already touched on that. The ethics are that I'm not out to harm anybody. I'm out to practice my religion and my spirituality and move forward. If someone's preventing me from doing that, harming me or harming someone so close to me that it prevents me from having my daily focus and my religion and spirituality, then yeah, you're falling back to that person's no longer an innocent. The idea that they can do whatever they want and you can't retaliate because of a harm none philosophy, I think is shackling, and I'm not sure that that's the greater wisdom. That's certainly not meant to put down anybody who firmly believes in that. If you firmly believe in harm none under any circumstances whatsoever, I mean, I tip my hat to you. That takes a lot of strength to do that. So, it's not a judgment. We're just clarifying positions here.
Well, and I also think that, for us, I know that we don't practice witchcraft. We live witchcraft. It's not something we do. It's who we are. And the first order of business is to recognize your part in anything that has come to your door, and then you act accordingly. And the first order of business is, how could I remedy this in the natural world? By talking to somebody, calling somebody, writing to somebody, taking avenues that would be normal and courteous and,
right. Those actions spurred magic last.
Magic lasts, that's correct. Because if you're truly living this, then your magic is in the living. You are endeavoring. For me, it's about the spirituality. I mean, I'm not really all about the magic of magical acts. Not that I wouldn't do it, but it's just not my first order of business to take care of things. I want to discern what is going on, how, what brought this here, and how could I do something about it. And on the other side of that is, you have to have, on the other side of an event or something, the willingness to want to, how could I say, you need the receptivity between the parties in order to come to some resolution and conclusion. And that also would dictate how it is ultimately handled.
Right.
But, participating in your life is so important rather than feeling like you're being victimized.
Yeah, and that, I want to add to that there are always consequences, even when you're in the right.
Or you feel you're in the right.
So, well, even if you are completely in the right and you do a work of magic, that doesn't mean that there aren't any consequences to what happens, and people will sometimes they'll laugh and mock you and say, well, look what happened because of what you did. Well, obviously, there's always going to be. So just being right doesn't mean things are going to go smoothly, and you know that just in your daily life. You can be right and treat people well, and they'll treat you like shit. So being in the right does not mean there aren't any consequences. The bill always comes due. So for Old World Witches, you have to realize that even though I'm right or feel justified, that there will be consequences. It's just magic. It's the way things happen. You want to minimize those. It's much, much harder to have consequences when you're completely in the right. It's harder to take than when you maybe realize you weren't completely in the right, but you went ahead anyway, and now, things have happened. That's easier to take because you feel, yeah, I sort of had that coming. But when you're totally justified, it's difficult when things happen, when you feel, hey, I was totally justified, now I got to put up with this nonsense. But it is part of the old world philosophy. Every action, there's a reaction and a consequence to it. You just want to minimize that. Always check in with yourself spiritually and say, okay, I think I need to do this work of magic because the other avenues have failed. I'm going to do it. Am I justified? What is really happening to me here? Do I need to respond to this? Whatever it might be. And you work that out. And if it calls for magic, then it's time for magic. But, for us, magic is usually my last resort. I will, make a phone call or write an email or in some way try to communicate with somebody first to see what we can do about the misunderstanding. But once that is no longer possible, once that avenue is not there or doors are shut, sometimes at that point then you think, okay, this calls for a magical solution. What will be the end result? I don't know, but I know it will put a stop to what's happening, and that may not be pleasant, but I have no choice, so I'm going to do that. And that's the old world view of ethics, to, again, relating back to the question in the chat room.
Well, there's probably a hokey song, but it's really a lovely song. And the words that really resonate with me is always stay humble and kind. I don't think you can go wrong with that. And I mean that in a sincere way, that if you're really endeavoring to be what you feel is the best that you can be in any given moment, then discernment is the way to go and not judgment. Because once you have placed a judgment on something, you are reacting to it. You're not really participating anymore. But when you discern things, you're contemplating and using introspection to understand the circumstances that you have found yourself in. And that brings a much better resolution, because I believe you can really see things in a clearer way, where there's whenever something is going wrong with people, there's always two sides to the story.
Right. And, I think that, and it may just be my age and having mellowed over the years, but when I'm engaged in a conflict, I don't call people names. I don't swear at them and do that type of thing, because that's a different energy than what I want to communicate. What I'm trying to do is find some resolution or correct something or bring it back into balance or peace. So, even though I will stand up for myself and state the facts, I often even begin things that I write with, I'm not going to say anything bad about this person. I'm not going to attack their character, but I am going to point out what is misrepresented in this conflict. So I just think it's better. In my 20s, I wasn't like that. I mean, I would write something, pretty nasty, and then I learned after a while, write that, but don't send it. Get it out of your system. You start off, dear asshole, and then you go into it, but then you save that email, and then the next day you reread it and think, is that really how I want to come across? And 9 times out of 10, I say, no, that isn't really how I want to present myself. I don't want to be viewed as that is my communication, or that's really the core of my spirituality. It was just a pissy moment I had. It isn't me. But the more you allow pissy moments to represent you, the more people think that is you. So I like to think I've learned a lesson over time that I can still stand up for myself and counter misrepresentations or lies or whatever it might be without getting angry, and just stating the facts and letting that stand, letting your simple truth stand, and letting your reputation stand for you, I think is really important. And then people get to discern that. What is your reputation? Do you have a reputation for being an asshole? If you do, then that's about, everyone will see just about everything you say in that light. If you have a reputation for being cordial, then that's the way people will take what you write. They'll read something you wrote and they won't automatically think you were snarky because you have a different reputation. So I think that's, again, old world style. My mother taught me about respect, and she was an old world Italian woman. And one of the things she taught me is that you don't have to respect somebody, but you have to speak to them as though you do. Because she said that it falls back on you to show disrespect, because that's a weakness in you, that you couldn't muster up being cordial in front of somebody that you don't respect, who is in a setting in which you all have to be together. When that person's there, you have to be cordial to them, because that's a sign of your spirituality. If you let that other person's presence turn you into something negative and ill feelings, and you say things, that's more harmful to you. That's taking away a piece of what is spiritual about you, and you're surrendering it to someone you don't like, because that energy is raising within you. And that does no good for anyone. Here you are at a gathering, and people can see you're being disrespectful to each other. But your reputation is being formed in those moments of what people think about you, how you handle things. So her message was to me, you don't have to respect your elders, but you have to show them respect. You have to act in a way that appears to be respectful. But true respect is different, she taught me. True respect is earned. When you truly respect somebody, there's nothing you need to guard against. It's your natural feeling. But when you don't respect someone who you need to show respect to, you have to work with that within your being the whole time you're in their presence. And look at any politician, for example. There's a lot of politicians that I have absolutely no respect for. But were I to have a personal meeting with them, I would be very cordial to them. I wouldn't let them see how I really feel about them, but I would have a conversation that was meaningful. But by showing them respect, I have their ear, and that's the difference. If I show them disrespect, I no longer have their ear.
Now, I know that there's a lot of people who call that mamsy-pamsy spirituality.
Oh, yeah, Raven's mamsy-pamsy spirituality.
But hey, that's who we are. What can I say? I mean,
no, it's a strength.
That's what we endeavored, that's who we are. That's what we want to bring. And hopefully in the weeks to come, that you will rejoin us and have a listen to the show, and that we will enrich and hopefully encourage you to explore things and to have a better understanding of yourself internally, and then in the external extension out into the world, that you find what you're truly looking for.
That's what we want to help with. We want to add our experience to allow you to be successful seekers on your own. So our shows aren't going to be like this one. This was almost, sort of our, droning on and on about this, that, and the other thing, and our little soapbox positions. But, our shows are going to be fun. They're going to be informative. And I think you'll really, really enjoy what we want to share.
And unfortunately, too, you're going to have to endure some shameless promotion because with all of your support, this is how we live our bliss. And so from time to time, we would like to encourage you to go and visit the House of Grimassi website. It's houseofgrimassi.com. And, and I'm going to be focusing a lot on putting up content onto it, because it's a WordPress site, which is really good for posting, blogs and other information that we would like to, get out to you. Also our appearances, where they're going to be and when they're going to be. It also links back to Raven's Loft website, ravensloft.biz. And I am going to be fading out. I am at this time fading out a lot of the merchandise in the store, because I have a revision for it. And so I am having a fantastical sale right now on Raven's Loft. If you are into going and taking a look, I'm really going to hone down all of the things that we sell to really represent and support the teachings that we have of Old Ways of Witchcraft. And also our courses of study. I did want to say that right now we have open registration for one of our courses. It's Inner Mysteries course, and you just want to say something a little bit about that. Yeah,
the Inner Mysteries is really about going below the surface of really anything and showing people that there's a lot more to this thing we call witchcraft or Wicca or paganism. There are a lot of inner teachings that really bring those aha moments and show you where power comes from and why we do the things we do, and that type of thing. So the Inner Mysteries is really to teach you a much, much deeper level that will enhance what you already have experience with. So that's really the purpose of that particular course.
Well, it teaches you the hidden relativity to the magical world around you.
Right.
It starts to unfold and gives you a different perspective on your worldview, so that it enhances and enriches your understanding of self, which in turn also enhances your extension out into the world. And this makes life so much more enriching. So that course right now is open for enrollment. It's going to be closing at the end of the month, and it'll begin May 1st. It's only a 7-month course.
Right.
It's very doable. So if you're interested in that at all, you can either go to the House of Grimassi for the link or go directly to Ravensloft, and you'll find it on the navigation buttons, you'll find it under courses.
And in it, there's a couple of lessons that deal with the Wheel of the Year, but in a way that is really not anything you're commonly finding these days. It's really a much, much deeper level about what is happening on the divine level and how the soul is interfacing with that. So it's not just about, oh, this is a celebration, this is how you do it. No, it's about the inner mechanism of that Wheel of the Year moment and why it's important. So it's really showing you a lot more behind the why of it, and I think that's really enhancing. We also begin be opening up our Ash, Birch, and Willow course of study in May. Will be enrollment, and then starts in June. So anyone who's interested in the Ash, Birch, and Willow perspective of Old World Witchcraft, ever ancient, ever new, that would be something that you might want to take a look at as well.
So I believe that we probably rambled on.
Yeah, we have rambled.
For tonight's show, and again, we're so appreciative and grateful for those of you who have joined us this evening. We all are also going to be posting this up. It'll be on iTunes, and of course the archives here at Blog Talk Radio. If you want to encourage any of your friends or fellow witches to come and have a listen or to begin listening, our next show will be on May 3rd. Wednesday, May 3rd, again, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, I guess. I don't know which it is right now. It's EDT, I think, or yeah.
Yeah, it's our time on the East Coast.
It's ET time.
Extra.
Yeah. So, again, thanks for joining us tonight, and we'd like to end the show with playing Jenna Green again, her beautiful Beltane song, which is right around the corner for all of us.
Yep, coming up.
So again, blessings to all, and we hope to have you back at the show next Wednesday. Thank you. Blessed be.
Take care.
love is